Do you know that right now, at the National Library of France in Paris, Marie Curie's notebooks are still locked inside thick lead boxes? If you want to touch them, you don't just need a special permit. You must wear full-body radiation protective gear and sign a liability waiver in case you later develop bone cancer or leukemia. More than a century has passed since she died, but those pages, holding handwriting shaky from exhaustion and her delirious joy, are still emitting a deadly light. They are still alive, and they are still killing. This is not the legacy of a saint. It is the scene of a murder that spanned decades, where the perpetrator and the victim were the same person. People often praise Marie Curie as a symbol of diligence and intellect. But through the eyes of a long-time storyteller, I see in her something far more terrifying: obsession to the point of self-destruction. She did not dedicate her life to science in the romantic way textbooks portray. She sold her soul to a demon named Radium in exchange for the power of a god. And the price was not just her life, it was far more expensive than that. Let's go back to 1898. Paris was cold, damp, and full of the smell of coal. If you imagine the Curie's laboratory as a clean, bright place with pure test tubes, you are vastly mistaken. It was a dilapidated shed, formerly a dissection room for the medical school, but abandoned because it was so poor. They even used it to store corpses before turning it into a stable. The roof leaked so much that when it rained, Marie had to use chalk to mark the spots where water dripped onto the floor to avoid placing machinery there. In winter, the temperature inside dropped to freezing levels. In summer, it turned into a stifling crematorium. Right in that hell on earth, Marie Curie, then a skinny Polish immigrant woman with eyes sunken from lack of sleep and food, was performing a crazy task: stirring giant cauldrons of boiling chemicals with a heavy iron bar nearly as big as herself. She was looking for something no one had seen, no one had named, and no one believed existed. "Marie, take a break," said Pierre Curie, her husband, a man with gentle eyes but a face always etched with dull pain. "No, Pierre, it's right here. I feel it," Marie replied, her voice hoarse from inhaling the toxic acid fumes rising from the ore pan. She did not stop. Her hands, once slender like a young girl's, were now rough, cracked, and beginning to show strange blisters that no ointment could heal. They were processing tons of pitch-blende ore, uraninite, filthy black industrial waste brought back from mines in Bohemia. To extract 1/10 of a gram of radium, they had to process tons of ore. It was the work of beasts of burden, not of scientists. But Marie did not consider it hard labor. She was in a trance, a love affair with matter. Every night, when the work was done, instead of going home to rest, the couple stood silently in the darkness of the shed. From the glass jars containing the solution they had just distilled, a ghostly, magical blue light radiated. It was beautiful, an enchanting, spectral beauty. It was like fireflies, but brighter and colder. Marie used to whisper, "Look, Pierre, it's like the eyes of fairies." They did not know that the fairy was bombarding their bone marrow every second, destroying DNA structures and gnawing at every cell in their bodies. They cherished those test tubes, put them in their pockets, left them on their nightstands, and Pierre even once tied a sample of radium to his arm just to see how it burned the flesh. Fatal innocence. In 1903, glory arrived, the Nobel Prize in Physics. The whole world acclaimed them. The aura of fame was no less brilliant than the blue light of radium. But few knew that on the night before the award ceremony, which they could not attend because they were too ill, a silent tragedy had begun to creep into their bedsheets. Pierre Curie was not just tired, he was in pain. His legs trembled with every step. Bone and joint pain tormented him every night. Doctors diagnosed it as rheumatism from working in the damp warehouse. But Marie knew, or vaguely realized but deliberately ignored, that something was wrong. Marie's hands began to go numb. Her fingertips were so calloused that she could barely grip small objects. The skin on her hands peeled continuously. Once, Pierre dropped a cup of hot tea, not because it was slippery, but because the nerves in his hands had begun to die. He looked at Marie, his eyes sunken with anxiety. "Marie, could it be because of our child?" The child Pierre referred to was Radium. Marie froze. She looked at her ulcerated hands, then at the test tube glowing on the desk. That light was her life, her honor. To admit it was toxic was to admit her spiritual child was a monster. "No, Pierre," she said, her voice firm, but her eyes averting his gaze. "It's just that we are working too hard. We need to rest." That was the biggest lie of her life, a lie she would regret until her last breath. Their bodies were rotting from the inside. But the greatest tragedy was not the disease. The tragedy was that fate had arranged a crueler ending for Pierre, an ending that would make Marie's sacrifice an eternal pain. April 19th, 1906, a rainy day in Paris. Pierre Curie left home to attend a meeting of the Association of Scientists. He looked pale, his gait unsteady. He shouldn't have gone out that day. He crossed Rue Dauphine, a busy and slippery street. His physical condition, ravaged by high-dose radiation for years, had robbed him of his usual agility and alertness. What was in his mind at that moment? The blue light? He didn't see the heavy cargo wagon rushing towards him. He slipped. It wasn't a normal fall. He fell right before the horse's hooves. The driver screamed, trying to rein in, but it was too late. The heavy rear wheel of the wagon crushed straight through the head of one of the 20th century's greatest minds. The death was sudden, bloody, and brutal. The bad news reached Marie while she was at home caring for her 2 young children. She didn't cry. She stood motionless, her face turned to stone. But in that moment, a part of her humanity died along with Pierre. She did not yet know that Pierre's death was only the beginning of a series of vengeful blows that fate would rain down upon her. After Pierre's death, Marie did not bury her husband in the usual way. She buried him in her mind, in an extreme and obsessive way. She was found sitting in her room, holding the bloody clothes Pierre had worn. She cut them up, not to throw them away, but to kiss those dried bloodstains. She wanted to keep every molecule of Pierre, even if they were the traces of a brutal death. From then on, she wrote a diary. No, they were love letters to the dead. "Pierre, why did you leave me? I work in the lab, but I no longer hear your footsteps. The radium jar still glows, but its light now feels so cold." The French government, in a clumsy attempt at consolation, offered her a widow's pension. Marie refused flatly. "I don't need charity. I am capable of earning a living for myself and my children." She did something unprecedented in French history. Took over her husband's professorship at the Sorbonne. November 5th, 1906. The Sorbonne Hall was packed. Students, journalists, the curious came to see what the widow would do. They waited for a tearful speech, a mournful memorial. But no, Marie walked in, her face cold, her figure small in a black morning dress. She stood on the podium, looking down at the breathless crowd. When we consider the distances between molecular particles, the whole hall was stunned. That was exactly the last sentence Pierre had spoken before he died. She didn't start over. She continued, as if Pierre had never left, as if death was just a comma in their great scientific work. That was the moment she asserted her position. But it was also when she erected a wall of ice separating herself from the world. 4 years later, loneliness is an acid. It corrodes the soul faster than radiation corrodes bone marrow. Marie Curie, the Iron Woman, was actually crumbling inside. She needed a fulcrum, and that person appeared. Paul Langevin. Ironically, Paul was Pierre's most brilliant student, a physics genius, handsome, intelligent, but trapped in a hellish marriage. 2 lonely and wounded souls found each other, a desperate love of 2 drowning people clinging to each other in a flood. Marie, now 43, found a little warmth in life again. She wrote Paul passionate letters, advising him to divorce his wife to build a new life. But she made a fatal mistake. She was famous, and she was a foreigner. In 1911, Paul Langevin's wife stole Marie's love letters, and she released them to the press. If you think today's paparazzi are scary, the French press back then were real bloodthirsty vultures. The tabloids screamed, "Polish woman steals husband," "prestigious scientist," or "home wrecker." They did not attack her science. They attacked her womanhood. They called her a filthy Jew, though she wasn't, an alien who came to destroy French morals. A furious crowd gathered in front of her house in Sceaux. Iran, her eldest daughter, just 14, hugged her sister Eve in fear as she heard breaking glass and screams, "Go back to Poland, you whore!" Marie Curie, who had brought glory to France, was now being spat in the face by France itself. In the eye of the scandal storm, shocking news arrived. Marie Curie won her second Nobel Prize. This time it was chemistry for the discovery of pure radium and polonium. She became the first person in human history to receive 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different fields. But before joy could kindle, a cold letter from Stockholm arrived. A member of the Nobel Committee wrote, "Madam Curie, considering the current shameful romantic scandals, we advise you not to come to Sweden to accept the award. Your presence would tarnish this solemn ceremony." They wanted her to receive the award by mail. They wanted to hide her like a disgrace. What would you do if you were Marie? Run away? Cry? Marie Curie wrote a reply, short and sharp as a razor. "The prize is awarded for the discovery of radium and polonium. I believe there is no connection between my scientific work and my private life. I will come." She went to Stockholm, head held high, face pale but eyes burning. She stepped onto the podium to receive the award, ignoring the scrutinizing looks, ignoring the whispers. She used her intellect to slap the hypocrisy of all Europe in the face. But when the velvet curtain closed, the Iron Woman collapsed. Immediately after returning to France, Marie collapsed. Her kidneys were severely damaged, high fever, delirium. She had to undergo emergency surgery and lay bedridden for months. It wasn't just kidney disease, it was radium. The invisible enemy had begun a total assault. Her bone marrow was dying. The burns on her hands would never heal again. Her ears began to ring with an eternal cicada cry, a sign of radiation poisoning. 1914. Marie was recuperating in a shabby house, away from public attention. She was emaciated, her hair turning very gray. Paul Langevin had returned to his wife, a cowardly but practical ending. She was alone again. But the outside world was shaking. Gunshots had fired in Sarajevo. World War I exploded. German troops were advancing on Paris. The French government evacuated to Bordeaux. Everyone fled. Marie Curie packed the most precious thing in her life. Not money, not jewelry. She hugged the heavy lead box containing France's only 1 gram of radium. She had to protect it. She took a train to Bordeaux, deposited her child in a bank safety vault, and then immediately took a train back to Paris, where bombs were waiting. "Mom, what are you doing? Are you crazy?" Iran shouted into the phone. "No, Iran," Marie said, her voice strangely calm, the voice of a general before battle. "People are dying out there, and I know how to look through their flesh to save them." She didn't know how to drive. She knew nothing of battlefield medicine. In that cramped, hot truck, reeking of gunpowder mixed with the smell of fresh blood, Marie and her daughter worked like machines. They had no lead gloves, they had no protective shields. They used their bare hands to adjust the X-ray bulb. Every time a wounded soldier was brought in, Marie put her face close to the fluorescent screen, taking the full beam of death rays into her eyes to find the shrapnel embedded in the soldier's flesh. "Stay still, young man," she said, her voice strangely calm. "It will be done soon." She argued head-to-head with rude military doctors, those who wanted to saw off soldiers' legs for speed. "No amputation. Look at this film. The shrapnel is here. Extract it and he will walk again." More than 1 million soldiers were scanned. Thousands of limbs were saved. Marie was honored as a living saint. But there was a cruel truth no one spoke of then. Marie was leading her daughter into death's door. Did Marie know? Perhaps she did. But in her extreme mindset, science demanded sacrifice, and if she was willing to die, her daughter had to be ready too. It was a grim kind of love that ordinary people could not understand. The war ended. Marie returned as the queen of science. She traveled the world, went to America to receive 1 gram of radium donated by American women. But her body was protesting violently. Her eyes were thick with cataracts, a direct result of looking at X-ray screens too much. She was nearly blind. She had to use note cards written in giant letters to give lectures. Her ears were deafened by the sound of cicadas. And her hands. Those hands were now wrinkled, rough like dry tree bark with hardened fingertips that had lost all sensation. Yet, Marie remained insanely stubborn. When the press began reporting on the deaths of the dial painters, the radium girls, who licked radium-tipped brushes and had their jaws rot away, Marie reacted very harshly. She refused to believe her child Radium was a murderer. She blamed poor technique, carelessness, anything but Radium itself. That is the tragedy of a genius. They create gods, but forget that gods can also slaughter their believers. She hid her ulcerated hands in her coat pockets everywhere she went. She didn't want anyone to see the evidence accusing Radium of its crimes. Summer 1934. Marie Curie collapsed completely. She was taken to the San Selimo's sanatorium in the Alps. Doctors diagnosed her with tuberculosis, but they were wrong. Her lungs were fine. What had died was the bone marrow. Blood tests revealed a horrifying truth. Her bone marrow had turned into a slimy, useless liquid. It could no longer produce red blood cells. It was pernicious anemia, a euphemism for leukemia caused by high-dose radiation exposure over a long period. Her body, once a durable machine, had now surrendered. In her final days, Marie lay on the stark white bed, her blind eyes turned toward the window, looking at the mountains she could no longer clearly see. High fever, delirium. In her stupor, she did not call God's name. She didn't mention her 2 Nobel Prizes. She muttered about numbers. She spoke of ore filtration processes. She moved her curled fingers as if stirring an invisible cauldron. Irene, remember to record the precipitation rate, she whispered. July 4th, 1934, Marie Curie's heart stopped beating. The doctor wrote on the death certificate, aplastic pernicious anemia due to long-term exposure to radiation. Finally, medicine was forced to admit the price she had to pay. Her funeral was quiet. No state funeral, no eloquent speeches, only family and close friends. She was buried in Sceaux Cemetery, resting on Pierre's grave. But the story didn't end there. 60 years later, in 1995, French President François Mitterrand decided to move the Curies to the Panthéon, the resting place of France's great men. The exhumation team proceeded to open the old coffin to move the remains, and they were horrified. When a Geiger counter was brought near Marie's wooden coffin, the needle jumped wildly and emitted a piercing screech. Her body was still glowing. After 6 decades underground, Marie Curie's bones still contained a massive amount of radiation. They were forced to place her body in a coffin lined with 2.5 millimeter thick lead to prevent radiation from shooting out and harming visitors at the Panthéon. She lies there, beside Pierre, in eternal darkness, sealed like a miniature nuclear reactor. And Irene, her little daughter? In 1956, Irene Joliot-Curie died at the age of 58. The cause? Leukemia. The same death, the same curse. Irene also won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry and also paid with her life for the treasure trove of human knowledge. Epilogue, Legacy and the Price to Pay. Today, if you have cancer and are saved by radiotherapy, remember Marie Curie. But don't just remember her as a dry monument in a textbook. Remember a woman with ulcerated hands, stirring boiling vats of acid in a dilapidated shed in the middle of a Paris winter. Remember the stubbornness, the loneliness, and the mad love she had for that deadly blue light. Her notebook still lies in the National Library of France. The half-life of radium-226 is 1,600 years. That means it won't be until the year 3500 that those notebooks can be touched by human hands. Marie Curie left not just knowledge, she left herself in every page, a dangerous, powerful, and eternal presence. She is still there, still living, and still reminding us of the universe's cruelest rule. No glory is free. If you want to touch the light of the gods, you must accept being consumed by it.